So, Pandu, I'm no means a search expert, so perhaps you can just talk us through how Google search works in very sort of basic terms.
I think a great place to start is with Google's mission, which is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Now, the world's information, a lot of it is, of course, on the web. And to organize the web is really to create an index of the web. So an index is like the index at the back of a book. You know, there's a word and all the pages that the word occurs in. And that's exactly what a web index is, with two important differences. One is simply that of scale, right? So a book has maybe 300 pages. The web has hundreds of billions or trillions of pages. So the web index is gargantuan in comparison. The other important difference is when you look up an index at the back of a book, you look it up one word at a time, right? Whereas on the web, of course, you look up multiple words at a time, which means there's a combinatorial explosion of ways that you can look up the web. So we get billions of queries every single day from all across the globe because of this combinatorial explosion. And remarkably, 15% of the searches we get every single day are ones that we've never seen before. So not only is there scale, but there's incredible novelty. Now, given this, if you do a search and we return, say, the 10 million results that match your search, that's not very useful. So we need to rank these. And given the scale, there's no sense in which we can rank it manually. We can't curate the results for all of these searches. So we have to do it with algorithms. And the way the algorithms work is we have a whole series of factors, several hundred of them. Each factor tells you a little something about whether a result is relevant to is helpful for the query or not. And we take all of these factors, put it into a big ranking function, and it generates a score. And we hope that that score is such that the high scoring results are actually the most useful results, and that's what we rank the results by. So in a nutshell, that's how search works.
So I guess then even for one search query, if you swap the words around in lots of different ways, that's a whole other new search query as well. So you could be asking the same thing, but in hundreds of different ways, and that's another challenge for you, I guess.
In fact, if you swap the words around, sometimes the meaning does not change, but other times the meaning does change, right? So you have to be sensitive to that also. But yes, you have to be able to handle all those variations.
I mean, I did a little experiment, I was in the office and I kind of Googled something on my laptop, Googled something on the work phone, and I was getting different results for sort of each search query. And why when I type into something into Google, why do I get a different answer on my iPhone to, say, my work laptop?
So I think I think the first thing to point out with getting different results is that this has nothing to do with or has very little to do with personalization, right? So one of the big myths that there is on search is that it is heavily personalized, and the reality is that search is largely not personalized today. And that's not because there's anything wrong with personalization, it's just that the search query provides you so much context about what you're looking for that there isn't much opportunity for personalization. There is personalization in some cases, like if you say what to watch and you get recommendations for movies and TV shows and things like that. In that case, of course, you want that to be personalized. So why are there differences in search results? One important reason for differences has to do with people in different locations, right? Location is a very important factor. This index of the web that we create is by no means static. And it's constantly changing as sources are creating new content and so forth. And so if you do the same search after a little time has passed, the results could be different. And then the final reason is more of a sort of a system reason, which is we have these data centers all around the world that host the index and give you this information. Now, because they are all over the world, we try to keep them in sync, of course, but given the size of all of this, it's hard to keep them exactly in sync. So if you're if one person goes to one data center and another person goes to another data center, they would get somewhat different results, just because keeping those two exactly in sync is such a hard problem.
So does that also mean that if I Googled the same thing twice on the same device, I could get different results just because it goes to like different like data centers?
It could, but for the most part, you shouldn't go to a different data center. If you are going to a different data center, then something else has happened that is forcing you to do that.
Mm-hmm. And I kind of started this whole investigation when I started Googling around. I'm a big sports fan. I was Googling, what are the best tennis players in the world, the best, basketball players in the world. And I was noticing that the images I was getting at the top, that I was getting fed largely white males. And I just wanted to know kind of, are Google sort of aware of search bias and kind of how you're tackling it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. This is an issue that we are both very aware of and is a priority. We have a significant team that works on different aspects of this kind of search bias. And I think over the years, we've actually made a lot of progress in this area. Now, it's important to realize that bias can show up in many, many different ways. So it's not like there's a silver bullet answer that you can just do this. And so as a result, we've developed many different techniques to address different aspects of bias, and we continue to work on this to specifically for the kinds of things that you've pointed to. So let me give you some examples of things that we've done. One interesting thing that we did just earlier this year, I think, is in image search. We realized that we want to be able to serve all users irrespective of their skin tones, right? And we did, and that's sort of important because we do seek to serve all users. And so in image search, when you do certain types of queries, things like beauty queries or people queries and things like that, we've done a few things. One is we've just tried to have a more diverse result set, so you can sort of see representations of yourself in there. But also we've created these refinements based on this Monk scale developed by Professor Ellis Monk at Harvard to allow you to pick products, for example, that match your particular skin tone, and then it's like a refinement chip that you can have. Another example, you mentioned sports, right? In sports, there's a lot of coverage on typically male sports and not as much on female sports. And so we've started addressing that more sort of actively with the recent March Madness college basketball season. We set it up so that there were explicit refinements for men's and women's. And then we would look for signals that said that tried to understand whether you were looking for the men's basketball or the women's basketball. If you search for a university, for example, Oregon State, and then you would know that, well, what was the game that Oregon State was just playing? Was it a men's game? Was it a women's game? And then we'd highlight the appropriate result, and we'd also provide you refinements in case we guessed wrong. So if we guessed men's and you wanted women's, or we guessed a women's and you wanted men's, there would be a chip that you could use to highlight it. It's worth noting that the way search works and it does language understanding is very different than the way people do it, right? So it's not like these algorithms are making any value judgments here. They are very much dependent on the content that's out there, right? And the content that's out there is informed by societal biases, by the fact that there's a prevalence of a certain type of content and maybe a paucity of a different kind of content. And our goal here is to make sure that we don't reinforce these types of biases.